A teenager's shoe does not belong nailed to a tree. It is an object of motion, of youth, of journeys just begun. To see it fixed in place, pierced by a rusted spike, and pinned to the unyielding bark of an ancient oak, is to witness a profound violation of the natural order. And in the autumn of 2015, when forestry workers found not one, but 4 pairs of shoes, arranged in such a manner deep within the forgotten woods of Lantern Hollow, it signaled the violent return of a ghost story the town of Oakhaven had tried for 17 years to forget. The story belonged to 4 teenagers who had, for all intents and purposes, walked off the face of the earth one brilliant summer afternoon in 1998. They were Liam Peterson and his girlfriend, Chloe Vance, both 18 and just weeks away from leaving for state college. With them were Mason Riley and his girlfriend, Ava Chen, both 17, a year behind them in school, but just as inseparable. They were good kids, ordinary in the most reassuring way, their lives a familiar tapestry of part-time jobs, summer bonfires, and the nervous, thrilling anticipation of the future. They were not expert survivalists or reckless adventurers. They were simply 4 young people in love, seeking one last shared memory before their paths diverged. Their plan was simple: a day hike into Lantern Hollow, a sprawling expanse of state forest that bordered their small town. The paradox that would come to define their legacy was the jarring juxtaposition of this innocent, sun-drenched plan with the macabre shrine discovered nearly 2 decades later, a cold, silent testament to a journey that had ended in unimaginable horror. The plan had been solidified over milkshakes at a local diner a week prior. They would hike the well-trodden 5-mile loop to Lantern Rock, a scenic granite overlook that offered a panoramic view of the valley. It was a local rite of passage, a place for first kisses and solemn promises made under the vast open sky. They packed light: water bottles, sandwiches, a single shared camera loaded with fresh film, and the unburdened optimism of youth. Their intentions were not to conquer the wilderness, but simply to exist within it for a few peaceful hours. The last anyone heard from them was a series of brief, cheerful communications on the morning of August 12, 1998. Chloe sent a text message to her mother from the trailhead, a simple note saying they were starting their hike and that the weather was perfect. An hour later, Liam's younger sister received a photo message from him, a grainy image of the 4 of them, squinting happily in the sun, with the dense green wall of the forest rising up behind them. Then, the digital trail went cold. Their phones, as far as network towers could tell, were either switched off or out of range by noon. Lantern Hollow was a place of deceptive beauty. On a map, it was a wide green blotch of protected land, crisscrossed by marked trails and babbling creeks. But to those who knew it well, it was a labyrinth of steep, unmarked ravines, sudden, dense thickets of mountain laurel, and disorienting stretches of identical-looking forest. It was a place that did not suffer fools gladly, a wilderness vast and indifferent, perfectly capable of swallowing the careless or the unlucky. This geography, beautiful and menacing in equal measure, would soon become the central, frustrating character in the desperate search to come. Concern began as a low hum that evening, growing into a frantic crescendo as the sun dipped below the ridge and cast the hollow into deep shadow. The teenagers were supposed to be home for dinner, when their cars were not in their respective driveways and their phones went straight to voicemail. A knot of parental dread began to tighten. Initial explanations, they lost track of time, they stopped for food on the way home, quickly wore thin. By 10 p.m., the 4 families had converged at the Oakhaven Sheriff's Department, their faces etched with a fear that was rapidly eclipsing logic. The official search began at dawn. It was a massive undertaking, a testament to the community's terror and resolve. The county sheriff's department coordinated with state police, bringing in search and rescue teams from 3 neighboring counties. Helicopters beat the air overhead, their spotlights cutting futilely into the dense canopy, while ground crews, a mix of trained professionals and over 100 civilian volunteers, fanned out from the main trailhead at Lantern Rock. They shouted the teenagers' names until their voices were raw, the sounds swallowed by the unforgiving woods. The search was methodical and exhaustive. Canine units swept the area, their handlers hoping for a scent, but the dogs seemed confused, circling back without ever establishing a clear track. For days, the teams grid-searched every foot of the marked trail and the surrounding terrain, peering into crevices and combing through thick underbrush. The scale of the effort was immense, yet the result was a chilling, profound nothingness. Not a footprint, not a dropped water bottle, not a single scrap of clothing. It was as if the 4 teenagers had simply evaporated into the humid summer air. In the absence of evidence, theories multiplied. The first, and most hopeful, was that they had run away together. It was a romantic notion that was quickly and clinically dismantled by investigators. All 4 had left their wallets, bank cards, and future plans behind. There was no financial activity, no sign of preparation. They had been excited for college, for the next chapter. This was not the behavior of runaways. The theory of a simple accident, a fall, a sudden injury, also seemed increasingly unlikely. An accident involving 4 people would have surely left some trace, some sign of a struggle or a slide that the exhaustive search would have uncovered. The first and only significant clue from the initial investigation emerged 2 weeks after their disappearance. Liam Peterson's 1992 sedan was discovered parked at a remote, seldom-used access point on the far western edge of Lantern Hollow, a full 15 miles by road from the Lantern Rock trailhead, where they had told everyone they were going. The car was locked and seemingly undisturbed. Inside, on the passenger seat, were their 4 wallets and the cell phones that had long since lost their battery charge. The discovery was a baffling contradiction that only deepened the mystery. Why would they drive to a different location than planned? Why would they leave their wallets and phones behind? The questions hung in the air, unanswerable and unnerving. The discovery galvanized the search effort, which immediately pivoted to this new, more rugged and remote section of the forest. Teams plunged back into the wilderness, this time with a renewed but desperate sense of purpose. They searched for another week, pushing deeper into the untamed parts of the hollow, but the result was the same. Nothing. The official search was called off on September 28, 1998, 6 weeks after the teenagers vanished. The hope that had fueled the town had curdled into a grim, resigned sorrow. The case remained open, but it was no longer an active search. It was now a file in a cabinet, a collection of dead ends and baffling inconsistencies. And so, the years began to pass. 17 years slipped by, turning the raw act of tragedy into a piece of local folklore, a ghost story whispered to scare teenagers away from the woods. The missing posters in shop windows faded, bleached by the sun, before being taken down one by one, leaving only the faintest outline on the glass. For the families, the passage of time offered no healing, only a prolonged, agonizing state of limbo. Their children were gone, but without bodies, there could be no closure, no final resting place. They were trapped in the amber of that one summer afternoon, forever waiting for a phone call that never came. The mystery of Lantern Hollow became a permanent scar on the community, a quiet, collective trauma that pulsed beneath the surface of daily life. Hope, once a burning fire, had been reduced to a single, cold ember, slowly dying in the suffocating darkness of the unknown. On October 5, 2015, 2 state forestry workers, Mark Colvin and David Rios, were conducting a timber survey in a restricted management area of Lantern Hollow. They were miles from any public trail. In a section of old-growth forest that rarely saw human visitors, it was Rios who saw it first. He stopped, pointing a gloved finger towards a clearing dominated by 4 massive oak trees. The arrangement was strange, almost unnaturally symmetrical. As they drew closer, the bizarre and horrifying nature of the scene came into sharp focus. Nailed to each of the 4 trees, at roughly eye level, was a pair of hiking shoes. They were weathered by years of exposure, the leather cracked and faded, the laces stiff with mildew. One pair was a set of men's sturdy hiking boots. Another was a pair of women's trail runners, their once bright colors now muted to a sickly gray. They were fixed to the trees with thick, rusted metal spikes, the kind once used to secure railroad ties. The scene was utterly silent, profoundly disturbing, and clearly intentional. It was not an accident. It was a shrine, a memorial, a declaration. The discovery triggered a maelstrom of activity. The area was immediately cordoned off as a crime scene, and the cold case file of the 4 missing teenagers was pulled from the archives. Forensic teams descended on the clearing, meticulously documenting the scene. The shoes were carefully removed and sent for analysis, which quickly confirmed what everyone already suspected. Dental records of the teenagers were cross-referenced with their known shoe sizes and brands. It was a perfect match. These were the shoes of Liam, Chloe, Mason, and Ava. The discovery was shocking and unnatural, a gruesome breadcrumb left 17 years too late. There were no human remains found at the scene, only the shoes. This absence was just as unsettling as the discovery itself. It was a taunt, a piece of the puzzle offered up while the rest remained hidden. The forensic breakthrough in the case came not from DNA, but from old-fashioned material analysis and historical records. The railroad spikes were identified as dating back to the early 20th century, consistent with those used on the old Black Creek logging railway, a line that had been defunct since the 1950s. The investigators had their first tangible thread. The discovery officially reclassified the 17-year-old missing persons case as a quadruple homicide investigation. The file landed on the desk of Detective Miles Corbin, a veteran investigator with the State Police Cold Case Unit. Corbin was methodical, patient, and unburdened by the emotional baggage and failed theories of the original investigation. He began by overlaying a map of the defunct Black Creek rail line with property records from 1998. He wasn't looking for a monster in the woods. He was looking for a ghost on a map. Corbin's methodical work led him to a single, overlooked property. A sprawling 80-acre farm that bordered the western edge of the state forest, through which a significant portion of the old rail bed ran. The property had belonged to a man named Silas Blackwood. Corbin cross-referenced the name with the original 1998 case file and found a brief, dismissive mention. Blackwood had been informally questioned 2 weeks into the search after a neighbor reported his general animosity towards hikers. The original deputies had written him off as a harmless, if eccentric, recluse. No formal interview was ever conducted. Corbin dug deeper into Silas Blackwood's history. He was a lifelong resident of the area, a loner who had inherited the farm but let it fall into disrepair. He had a history of minor disputes with the town over property lines and had been known to post aggressive no trespassing signs, some of which reportedly included crude, threatening language. He fit the profile of the hidden monster, a local, secretive, paranoid man with a profound lack of empathy and a festering resentment for the outside world. Silas Blackwood, now in his late 70s, was still living on that same isolated property. Armed with a search warrant, Detective Corbin and a team of state police officers drove up the long, unpaved driveway to the Blackwood farm on a cold November morning. The property was even more dilapidated than records suggested. The farmhouse sagged, its windows dark and empty like vacant eyes. Rusted farm equipment lay half swallowed by overgrown weeds, and the entire property was surrounded by a palpable aura of decay and isolation. It was a place frozen in time, a forgotten corner of the world where secrets could easily fester. Silas Blackwood met them on the porch. He was a gaunt, weathered man with pale, watchful eyes that held no surprise, only a flat, weary resignation. As the team began their search of the cluttered, musty farmhouse, Corbin engaged the old man in conversation. Blackwood was quiet, his answers clipped and evasive. The search of the house yielded nothing. It was in a large, rickety barn, under a dusty canvas tarp in the far corner, that investigators found it, a heavy, cedar-lined chest. It was unlocked. Inside the chest lay the undeniable, damning evidence that connected the past to the present. There were 4 backpacks, faded but perfectly preserved. Inside one was Ava Chen's journal, its last entry describing her excitement for the hike. In another was the camera, the film inside still waiting to be developed. There were driver's licenses, school IDs, and small personal trinkets. It was a time capsule of 4 stolen lives, a collection of trophies kept by their killer. The evidence was irrefutable. Faced with the contents of the chest, Silas Blackwood's silence finally broke. He was taken back to the station, and over the course of a 4-hour interview, he confessed to the murders of the 4 teenagers. His confession was delivered in a monotone, a cold and detached recitation of events entirely devoid of emotion or remorse. He explained that on that August afternoon, he had been patrolling the edge of his property when he saw the 4 teenagers cut across a corner of his land, laughing and talking, oblivious to the invisible line they had crossed. This simple act of trespassing, he claimed, was a sign of profound disrespect. The motive, when it was finally revealed, was as senseless as it was monstrous. He harbored no personal grudge against them. He did not even know their names. His actions were born from a deep-seated paranoia and a hateful resentment of anyone he perceived as an outsider. He confronted the group, and when they responded with what he interpreted as youthful dismissiveness, something inside him snapped. He told them he knew a shortcut to Lantern Rock, a secret locals path. Trusting the seemingly harmless old man, they followed him away from the trail and deeper into the woods, onto his property, where he led them to the secluded barn and ended their lives. Following his confession, Blackwood led investigators to 4 separate unmarked graves scattered across his vast property, finally bringing the long and agonizing search for the teenagers' remains to an end. The shoes, he explained, were something he did much later. He said he had nailed them to the trees about 5 years prior, a strange, twisted act of marking his territory, a private monument to his perceived authority. It was a bizarre final act of a killer who wanted his crime to be known, but only on his own terms, in his own time. He showed no remorse, only a grim satisfaction that his property had been respected. In the spring of 2016, Silas Blackwood stood trial. Over the course of 2 weeks, the prosecution laid out the 17 years of pain and uncertainty, culminating in the chilling discovery of the shoes and the damning contents of the chest in the barn. Blackwood remained silent and impassive throughout the proceedings. The jury found him guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to 4 consecutive life sentences in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that the man who had valued his land over 4 human lives would die behind bars. The story of Liam, Chloe, Mason, and Ava is a tragic reminder of the terrifying fragility of life. They were 4 bright, hopeful young people, standing on the precipice of their futures, their lives a canvas of infinite possibility. Their journey into Lantern Hollow was meant to be a simple, joyful adventure, a final chapter in the story of their youth. Instead, they stumbled across the path of a hidden, banal evil, their lives extinguished not for passion or greed, but for the petty, paranoid rage of a man who saw their innocent footsteps as an unforgivable intrusion. Their ghosts no longer haunt the hollow. They now rest in peace, but their memory serves as a somber warning that the greatest monsters are often the ones hiding in plain sight, guarding nothing more than their own bitter and empty hearts.